Christy, welcome back to my channel and welcome to card 20 in my 2016 holiday card series. Today I'm using this memory box set called Snowglobe Wishes, as well as the I Love Christmas 6x6 by Echo Park. I'm going to begin with my Copic coloring today, so I'm starting out with this little sleeping deer, and for him I'm going to use E53, E55, and E57, and I started with my E53 just kind of laying in my shadows, and then I'm bringing in the E55. And I realized when I started coloring that this is another marker that needs to have the nib replaced because it's just a little bit streaky and a little bit sticky, and so I'm not going to use it too much, but I switched to the E57 now for my darkest shadows, and I'm just going to add those into all the places where the light wouldn't hit. And then I will go back with that E55, but just a little bit. I don't want to use too much of it. I don't want it to ruin the image, but I did want to have that warm transitions shade, since there is quite a bit of difference between the E53 and the E57. But now I am going back in with that E53 and just blending out the rest of that image to give him a nice highlight on his hindquarters and his back and his face especially. Now I'm adding the E51, and I'm going to use that to color in his antlers and also for that little spot around his eye on his face. While I have my browns out, I'm also going to color in this little sack, and I'm using the E51 and the E53, and then I added in some dark with the E57, and then I'm just blending that out with the E53 again. I will also use that E57 to just color in my tree trunks. For Santa's face, I'm going to add E51 right under the hat, and then I'll just blend that out with the E50. And I'll color his little nose with the E51. For his Santa suit, I'm going to use R29, R39, and R59. And I just started out with the R29 to give that some good coverage. I'm skipping ahead to the R59 to lay in my shadows, and I'm just putting those under his arms and along the sides of his body, and then also where the flap of his coat overlaps the other side there. And then I'll just blend that out with the R39 and finish with the R29, which gives everything a really bright and pretty red. For his hat, I'm just going to start with the R59 right above the brim, and then I'll add the R39 and finish with the R29. And then I'm also going to use those same three shades to do the ruffle at the bottom of the snow globe. So I'm just starting with the R59, just doing a very light line of that, and also a very light line of the R39 to just blend that out. And then I will fill in the rest of those little loops with the R29. And that second pop of red is going to make it look nice and festive, but also tie into the rest of the card. So for the trees, I pulled out G21, G24, and G28. And I started with the G28, just kind of shading the tops of the trees and then under each little section. And then I blended that out with the G24. And when I got to the end of that, I decided that I actually liked the look of the white at the bottom of each section of the tree. So I decided to not even use the G21. I'm just going to leave it as it is. For Santa's beard and the other white elements, I'm using W1 and W00. And I'm just doing a little shading by coming in from each side. And then I will grab my W00 and just blend that out a little bit. And I'll leave the centers of everything white. To finish off these images, I'm just going to take my Sakura white jelly roll pen and I'm going to color in the spots on the deer's back, just so they're nice and bright white again. It was a lot easier than trying to color around them. And then I'm going to take that pen and add it over top of the white spaces that I left on the tree, just to give them a little bit more dimension with the pen rather than the blank paper. And I'll just die cut those out with the matching dies. So I wanted one of these pattern papers to be a flag on the card, so I'm taking the Lawn Fawn Stitch Party Banners dies. This is the smaller of the two banners in that die set, and I'm just lining that up at the bottom and taping that into place. And then I'm also using the middle of the Lawn Fawn Stitched Scalloped Borders dies, and then I'll just run those through my Cuttlebug. And you can see that nice stitching detail that they give. Then I'm going to grab my ATG gun and begin adhering my pattern papers to my card base. So the first piece of pattern paper is just cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 to fit the entire front of the card. And the card base is W+9's oatmeal cardstock. Then I'm going to take my banner strip here that I had die cut and just add a little more ATG to that. And then I can line that up right where I want it on the card and just press that into place. And then I'll grab my scissors and just trim off the excess. Next, I'm going to take my scalloped piece and just run some ATG along the edge of that. And then I will use my grid mat to line that up with the piece of plaid pattern paper. I'll add a little more ATG to the back of that whole panel, and then I can just line that right up on the card and adhere that right over top of everything else. I'm going to set everything aside except for the snow globe and the snowbank that I die cut out. There is a die in that set for that. And then I'm going to take some antique linen and some frayed burlap distress ink because I wanted to give it kind of an antiqued look. I'm just coming in from the edges with very light pressure. And then I will also just add a little bit to the white edge underneath the red ruffle just to make it consistent. Next, I'll take the frayed burlap and I'm going to add even less of that, tapping it off onto the paper first to make sure I don't pick up too much ink, and just darkening those edges. When I'm finished with that, I'll just set that aside and I will grab my snowbank and the tumbled glass distress ink. And I'm actually just going to use whatever ink remains on the blending foam to just give that a soft blue highlight. I'm going to take a sentiment from the Tiny Tags Saying set from Lawn Fawn, and I'm going to ink that up in some chili pepper ink. And I will just stamp that towards the top of the snow globe. I wanted to test it out on a piece of scratch paper first since it was a brand new stamp. So I'll just add that right to the top. And then I'm going to take this little flourish that is also in that stamp set, and I'll ink that up and stamp it right underneath. I'm going to take a small snowflake from the Snowglobe Wishes stamp set and ink that up with some Color Box Frost White ink. And I'm just going to stamp that on the background. It's just going to be very subtle. You can see it in real life. We'll see on camera if it shows up very well. But that's just going to add a little texture and pattern to the background. I've added some foam tape to the back of my snow globe, and I'm just going to go ahead and pop that up over the top of the card. And then I also have some foam on the back of the little snowbank piece. So just make sure that that's straight. And then I'm going to add a little foam to the top of the sleeping deer. And since my Tombow Mono is running low, I'm actually going to use glue dots to adhere the flat parts. And I'm also going to use the glue dots to adhere the two trees behind the deer, just nestling the larger one under that sentiment. And I'm purposely allowing some of my elements to hang out over the sides of the snow globe. I just thought it would be a unique look. My Santa is also going to get adhered flat to the card with the glue dots because I want him to be a little bit behind the deer, behind the snowbank. And then I'll add the little sack with foam tape. I've tied a bow with some ribbon. This is either from Michael's or Hobby Lobby, I'm not sure. I definitely bought it a year or two ago, but that's the brand. And then I just tied two little jingle bells with some May Arts button twine right around the knot of that. And I'm going to trim off the ends. And I was being lazy and not using my ribbon scissors, and it wasn't working out so good for me, so I'm going to switch to my ribbon scissors to just cut a little flag end in the end of each of those just by folding the ribbon over and then cutting a V shape. And I will adhere that right over top of the snow globe with some Ranger Multimedia Matte, just adding a generous dollop of that and then pressing the bow right down into the glue. And as a final embellishment, I'm going to take some 4 and 6 millimeter sparkling clear sequins from Pretty Pink Posh, and I'm just going to add some more of the Ranger Multimedia Matte right underneath that, and then I will just set them into place with my pick-me-up tool. And that is going to complete our card for today. I can't believe I made it to day 20 in this Christmas card series already. Previously, I had only made it to 12 videos in the Christmas card series. So it was a really big effort, but I hope you guys really enjoyed, and I had a lot of fun reading your comments. I think I will have one last video on Monday, but that will be it for this Christmas card series, and then I'll take some time off to enjoy the holidays with my family. Here's a couple extra videos in case you're interested in watching those in the meantime. And you can always click on my photo to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.